Sweeties, how are you doing? Welcome to Nanyacim. If this is your first time of coming across this channel, sweetheart, kindly smash the subscribe button, turn on the notification so you get notified each time I upload, and please give this video a thumb up. I appreciate you all, and I want to say a very big thank you to every one of you for always coming back to watch my videos, commenting, and also subscribing. You all are the very best. So today we'll be checking out the burial ground in New York, right? And there are so many places in the United States, like, where Black people had to escape, fight, and die and suffer, right? And just like the African burial ground, guys, in New York. And this history was never told till bones of your ancestors was uncovered, because they wanted to put a federal building up, and it was like a very big battle to stop them in the early 90s from building mounting that building. Let's get into it and see what people are saying about it, because it's actually a young white man that raised the alarm, like, on TikTok, and people are tagging to it. Let's get into it.
I'm in New York to do press for the Discipline book, but I'm in the middle of writing the Justice book. I wanted to stop here. This is the African Burial Ground Memorial Monument. Thousands of bodies of African slaves were buried here over 100 or so odd years, and then forgotten about, not just literally, but forgotten about figuratively as a part of American history. And you can't think about justice in this country without thinking about the profound injustices that have happened here. And when you read about these high-minded ideals, it's very easy to get inspired, but then you also have to go to the depths of it. You have to explore the unpleasant parts. And if you're not seeking out things that make you uncomfortable, that challenge you, you're probably not practicing philosophy or stoicism, you're not pursuing wisdom, and you're certainly not in pursuit of justice, which I think the Stoics would say in the end is rooted in truth, it's rooted in fact. And so I'm taking a couple minutes just to sit here and meditate on that before I run and go do media appearances today and tomorrow.
You can imagine. It's only heaven that knows what they told probably their families, what happened to them, and probably there is no accountability of what happened to them, how they died. They were just buried. Hi, heaven. Let's get into the stitches and see what people got to say about this.
So where'd they end up burying all the black people? They were buried here, on the other side of the wall that gave Wall Street its name. All funerals had to take place during the day, and no more than 12 people could attend an African funeral. Because during the 1600s and 1700s, white people were deathly afraid of slave revolts. They were scared that black people would get together and unite behind a common cause, like freedom. That same fear was echoed in the 1960s during the Civil Rights Movement. And those same fears are felt today with calls for equity, social justice reform, and police reform. So from the 1690s to the 1790s, about 2 to 3 acres of land in Lower Manhattan was used as a cemetery for roughly 20,000 free and enslaved Africans. Later on, it was buried under 25 feet of landfill, and downtown Manhattan as we know it today was built on top. It was rediscovered in 1991 while building a federal government office building where the remains of 420 Africans and over 500 individual artifacts were found. From Broadway and Chambers Street all the way down to where the Twin Towers once stood was built on top of a cemetery for free and enslaved Africans, including parts of Manhattan's Chinatown and Foley Square, which has 5 bronze historical medallions set into the sidewalk, telling the story of the park and its surroundings, including one for the Negro Burial Ground, which has been preserved as the African Burial Ground National Monument that sits on Duane Street and African Burial Ground Way, also known as Elk Street. You can find it in the Civic Center section of Lower Manhattan. Before waves of European immigrants came and gentrified New York, it was built by enslaved Africans, back when it was called New Amsterdam and New Netherlands. From Manhattan to Harlem to Brooklyn and every borough in between, enslaved Africans helped to build the city of New York, and European immigrants came and built their city on top of our graveyards.
What an injustice. Let's get into the next one.
Today I went on a stroll down Wall Street and decided to stop by the African Burial Ground. used from the 1600s to the 1790s, and just 20 feet below this grass are the bodies of 15,000 enslaved Africans, discovered here in 1991 during excavations to build a new financial building. Contrary to miseducation and popular belief, New York was heavily involved in the African slave trade. In fact, Wall Street as we know it today was built entirely by slave labor. During this era, enslaved Africans buried their loved ones here because this part of Wall Street used to be very swampy and undesired by whites. So the whites designated it to the Africans. Enslaved African Christians were not allowed to be buried on white church property because white Christians believed they were more superior and closer to God than the blacks. This is the only landmark in Wall Street telling the story of the. Today I took a stroll down Flatbush, Brooklyn, and decided to stop by the Flatbush African Burial Ground. Formerly known as the Negro Burying Ground, this was a cemetery for free and enslaved Africans from the 1700s until 1827 when slavery was abolished in New York. The exact number of bodies buried here are unknown. However, in 1840, when a public school was built on the grounds, they found bones in the basement. When Bedford Avenue was paved and built, they found bones, but still built the road anyway. We do know of one enslaved African who is still buried here, and her name was Eve. She died at the age of 110 years old. We know this information because her obituary was published in the local newspaper. She was enslaved by Lawrence Voers, who was one of the largest slaveholders in not only Flatbush but all of Brooklyn. The land itself originally belongs to the Canarsie and Munsee indigenous peoples. However, in 1654, under the command of none other than Peter Stuyvesant, the Dutch church forcibly installed itself on this land. Dutch settlers moved in and removed the indigenous people who this land originally belonged to. They turned this land and the community into an agricultural place and enslaved Africans to work the land for free so that they could financially profit. In October 2020, Bill de Blasio planned to build quote-unquote affordable housing over this burial site. This affordable housing was actually a 130-unit high-rise. Thanks to the Flatbush African Burial Ground Coalition, plans for this stopped. Contrary to the African Burial Ground, the Flatbush Reformed Dutch Church's main cemetery, so the cemetery that housed its deceased white enslaved owners, still remains safely intact today. Housing the remains of white slave owners like the Vanderbilts and the Lefferts.
Never known nothing but work, never knew rest. Felt like my back was going to break. This is the gospel truth. So you could ask them. But then something even more peculiar happened. Our ancestors unearthed themselves on Wall Street. Most people don't associate slavery with New York or the North. The truth is all 13 colonies had slavery. With estimates of 10 to 20,000 people buried in this 7-acre burial ground, it is considered the largest known site of its kind in the U.S. Blakey's analysis of human skeletal remains revealed that these men and women were literally worked to death. Well, how do you know? They suffered from enthesopathies, a condition resulting in the muscle detaching itself from the bone as a result of people being worked beyond human capacity. You lazy people, you. Now, who?
Things that they don't teach us, part 3. Now, I'm not from New York, so if some of you New York City people know this information, please comment with any information that you have on this topic. But to those who don't know, let me get you hip. Did you know that near and underneath the World Trade Center is the burial ground of thousands of African American slaves and, they say, some free ones as well? Now, prior to the World Trade Center being built, and it's saying that approximately under or 25 feet underneath the Manhattan street, there is approximately 20,000 slaves buried, with 40% of those slaves actually being children. Now, along with those burial plots that extended miles and blocks within a New York street, which was known as the northern border of New York at that time, there was also a lot of artifacts found within those slave burial grounds as well. And it is actually said that the reason that they have all of those burials there, all those burial plots there, near Ground Zero, or what we know now to be Ground Zero, is because that the African slave could not be buried in a regular cemetery. But based on the amount of bodies and the amount of children found at one time in that area, it seemed like something else could have happened, and it is possible that those bodies could have accumulated throughout time. But just based upon the history of slavery within itself and what has been done with our people, it's hard for me to believe that there's nothing else that we now know the area as the area of being the place where 9/11 took place. And though that is a very unfortunate event for America, we cannot forget the slaves that were also at that location and around that location. Yeah. Since then, there has been a lot of debates on this topic. There has been a lot of speculation, and there's been a lot of assumption and accusations thrown out there. The funding for this research to help us find out what happened at a point in time was not that much. I'm not sure what's going on with, the funding situation with that today, but I do know that at least 400 of the remains found at that time, from what I last heard, was currently at Howard University in their research center. So if you do want to look that up, just look up the African American burial ground in New York City, and you should find some information. And so that's part 3. Almost put up 2 fingers, part 3. Stick around for part 4. Then I'll put it up, of course.
Even with it, sorry, even with everything they stole from your ancestors, they are still stealing. They also want to steal from you. Stay woke. If you leave them, they are going to suck your blood and use it to power cars. These people are not humans. I'm sorry to say it, but then it is what it is. Let me know what you all think in the comment section, and see you all in my next video. Bye for now.